Now, in the meantime, it's time for Linda Reynolds. It's time for our panel, and it is called Been There, Done That, because we all have, right? It's about bringing your personal experiences into your writing. I think it's kind of hard not to do that, but there are some writers who have very specific and interesting backgrounds that they bring to their work, and it also helps guide the direction of their work. Now, our moderator is Linda Reynolds, and she goes by her author name, L.M. Reynolds. I first met Linda when we were both at an awards conference for Florida Writers Association. We were sitting next to each other at the table. We had never met before. We didn't know anything about each other, but we were both up for an award, the Royal Palm Literary Award. Halfway through the dinner, we found ourselves clutching each other's hands and shaking because we were wondering what was going to happen and would we win or would we not. And we were so scared and excited at the same time. And we both got first place Royal Palm Literary Awards that night. And we have been solid friends ever since for supporting each other that evening. It was great fun, and it's a wonderful memory. I would like you to know that Linda, right out of college, went to work for Pan Am Airlines. And I was a flight attendant, and she says a purser, then into management, and she wrote the training programs for Pan Am Airlines. How amazing is that? She had a long career in information technology too, IT as we know it. And she designed applications and did programming. She's just brilliant. She knows how to do everything. And it's probably to her demise because people come to her for help because she knows what she's doing. So a few years ago, she decided to write that novel that I mentioned earlier. That was her first novel. And it came off as an immediate success. And now she has 3, her latest being One Deliberate Act. And as you've been hearing, or if you heard the interview first thing this morning with Scott DeLisi, it is a very powerful story and hard to put down. So Linda wants you to know that she also likes chocolate, wine, and travel. Welcome, Linda. Maybe that's why we're friends. All right, so right? Linda, I turn it over to you.
It's unfortunate that I don't have the glass of wine beside me right now. It probably isn't. In any event, hi everyone. And the reason that we're here today is whether we're authors of fiction or nonfiction, our life experiences play an important part in our motivation for writing, as well as help to enrich the stories that we write. So today we're going to explore those avenues and how we bring personal experience to your writing. Before we actually get started, could we go around and I'd like everybody to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Donna.
Hi, my name's Donna Lee Overly. I started writing about 5 years ago. I have 5 contemporary women's fiction books splattered with romance, and I just did my first self-help genre book and published it in November. I was a nurse for 20 years, and it's important in my writing. I'm also an artist. My main character in my fictional books is an artist and a tennis player. They say, write what you know. And so I've really drawn on my life experiences in my book. I've lived on Amelia now for about 5 years. Love it.
Great. Thank you. And next is Lisa Begin-Kruysman. And tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me here. I'm pretty new to this group. I've only lived in Southeast Georgia for 2 years, coming from New Jersey. For the past 12 years or so, I've pretty much platformed myself as a dog writer, writing about the dog-human bond. I've written 5 books. I currently serve on the board of the Dog Writers Association of America, which was founded in 1935. I serve as their Facebook and other social media and events, and contribute to the Rough Drafts newsletter. And I enjoy writing about dogs, but I think you're also writing about humans. you can't, you write about both ends of the leash, and it's worked for me, and I hope to continue writing down here.
Thank you, Lisa. And Bill, welcome.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit about yourself.
Well, right now I'm an independent publisher of books for quite a few authors, but all my writing is probably a dozen books over the years have all been based entirely on personal experience and all nonfiction. So I don't write any fiction at all. But the one book I have here is I wrote a book on relationship, which was totally out of character for me. And because everything else I've written has been more about woodworking or about government or about handyman business, things like that. But I decided I needed to write this, and it was really a difficult project. But anyway, there's also 3 other books here that my wife, Barbara Francis, wrote, and those are all fiction. So.
Oh, I didn't realize that your wife was a writer as well. That's very cool to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Esther.
My name is Esther Jantzen, and I'm not on Amelia Island. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I had met Andrea many, many years ago, and we had a car accident together that was my fault. But anyway, that's a different story altogether. As I said, I'm a retired educator. I worked mostly in Philadelphia, and my first book projects had to actually do with family literacy, because that was what I was most interested in supporting in the country. And family literacy and parenting education was what I was focusing on. However, I had an experience, which is actually the one that my fiction book is based on. I had an experience that led me to a great interest in the nomadic life. And I published an ebook on how to live as a house sitter. That's now not available on Amazon because it's in revision, but I hope to put it back up on Amazon before too long. And I recently, a year ago, I published my first fiction, and I'm going to show you the cover because actually the title of the book is cut off on the whatever we have it on the website. The character is shown, and I think he's adorable, but you need to have the title if you are at all interested in it, which is Walk, Jamie Bacon's Secret Mission on the Camino de Santiago. It's for middle grade young adult children and our teens, and adults are loving it very much too. So that's what I'll be talking about today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Esther. I'd like to explore, first of all, I'd like to ask all of you, did you enter the writing arena? Was it a sudden inspiration, or was it a more gradual process? And did you know from the time that you were little or the time you were much younger that you wanted to write? Donna.
I never thought I'd ever be a writer. Was not an aspiration of mine as a child. In fact, English in high school was my worst subject and least favorite. And it happened very gradually. I was a nurse, as I said, and then I went back to school when I was 48 and got an art degree. And then I started mixing my art with words. And I did a show where I paired my paintings with poetry and stories. And it got a lot of publicity, and it was favored. And that sort of spurred on, oh, I should do more writing, because it connected more with people, and it connected the people with my artwork. And that's the whole, I think, mission of all of us, is to connect with people. That's why we do what we do. That's why artists paint and why writers write. And so it evolved from there. And then I decided, after going through a bout with cancer, which makes you realize that every day is important, and it might, it's now, that I should have a goal. And my goal was to write a book and get it published. And that started me in January 2nd of 2014 was the exact day I started writing.
Mhm.
Awesome. You really remember the day. I am not sure I could do that.
Yep.
Let's skip over to Bill. Did you start writing early? Did you know you wanted to write? What prompted you?
No, actually, I got a job with the government housing program, and I picked things up very quickly. So they asked me to write instruction manuals, and that's how I started writing instruction manuals. And gradually went into doing a little bit of consulting in housing for federal programs, and wrote several books for them. And then when I left that, I just decided I really wanted to keep writing. So I just kept writing, and then it was hard to get anything published. So I decided to learn how to publish books.
Mhm.
And that's how I got into that.
Yeah, and Bill has written a number of, a lot of his books are how-to, which you might find interesting, how to do woodworking and how to self-publish and I thought the most interesting one was how to survive unemployment, which was pretty cool. Esther, how did you evolve?
Well, it wasn't that I wanted to be a writer so much as I wanted to change the world. And I think I'm an Enneagram 1, if that means anything to anybody, but that's a character type that seems to want to change the world. And I also had the sense that if you want to change like consciousness or introduce an idea, what's needed is to create images in the minds of people and young readers. And I mean, I was very affected, for example, by Heidi, which my mother read to me when I was 6 or something. And I thought, okay, so let me see if I can do some writing in order to support changing the world. And that's actually why when I first started getting serious about it, I ended up writing things related to family literacy and parenting education, like to support the education system. But when I couldn't sell those, when they didn't go anywhere, I gave up for a while, and then I got my inspiration. And it did come as a sort of like an inspiration to try fiction. And that was a long process, learning how to write fiction, especially for kids. But I'm really I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah, I think you've done well at it, because your book Walk, which I think we want to explore a little bit in a few minutes, won an award at the Best of New Mexico, Arizona books. So pretty good.
Thank you.
Let's go to Lisa. So Lisa, did you inspiration sudden or very gradual?
Kind of in and out, winding. I started my career as a human resources associate for Home Box Office in New York City. It was a great job, but I wanted to be an artist. So when I found a way out, I went to Italy, came back, worked full-time as an artist, still paying. But during this long stretches of art shows, when it gets quiet, I started writing. And so I started entering Writer's Digest competitions, and I got right off the bat, got some honorable mentions, which is difficult. So I thought that was a sign that maybe writing was for me. I wanted to write for kids originally, but it's a tough industry. Writing for children is not easy. I think a lot of people go there because they think it is. It's easier to write for adults. So one day when I was sitting around to January 2nd, 2010 or 2009, I found something called National Dog Week on the internet, and I was fascinated. It had such great history. It was really the timeline of the tail wagger in America. And from then on, I met people who were involved in the dog industry, which is huge, huge. And it kind of went on from there. I started writing about the people I met. I started blogging. I looked for an agent, found an agent. I found a few, got tons of rejection, more than anyone would ever want to would ever fill this room. But you keep on going, it becomes a challenge. And then you actually write because you want to write about something that's important to you. And it's really become just something I love to do.
Good. And you, the dog connection, the canine connection.
It's limitless.
One of your early books was actually, or maybe it wasn't an early one, but a biography of Will Judy, who was the founder of
National Dog Week,
National
and
Dog Week.
publisher of Dog World magazine. I mean, he's an amazing person.
So
And
very
nobody
cool.
ever heard of, not many people outside the dog circle had ever heard of him. So that was my mission, to bring him and his work.
Well, you've educated all of us, because I had never heard of him either until I read about it. So that's very,
Thank you.
very generous of you to bring him in and introduce him to the world. Very nice. I want to know about one standout experience that you personally have then used in your writing. Let's go with you. We'll go back to you, Lisa. We'll start there.
Well, actually, it was in Amelia Island in 2009. It's a long story. I thought we lost our dog. Long story short, she was hiding in a closet. My late husband and I had never, he put the luggage in that closet, closed the door. It was a big place, and she disappeared. So, I mean, it became terrible. You know, I think we had flyers, the whole neighborhood, and Summer Walk, Summer Beach, Maryland Green. Actually, I collapsed on her lawn. She came out, she asked if I was okay. I told her what happened. She took me everywhere. Turned out we'd known each other from New Jersey years ago.
Oh my goodness.
It's a very, I'm not even going to go there. There's so many interwoven elements here. And turned out, and I won't spoil it, she was hiding in our closet 48 hours later. Big Portuguese water dog that never said boo. And how I found her was kind of mystical. And it's in the book. It prompted me to write that very first story. I decided on the drive home, I started drafting it. And my brother-in-law, David Lender, a thriller writer, was a pioneer in Amazon writing, and he helped me put these stories together. So that was how I finally got all my blogging in there, all my experience, and it kind of helped me along.
And did you fictionalize the event in your story?
Yes, I did. And that's interesting. And I'll say that here in the story, a woman loses a child to drowning. Now, that was not me. However, I got sympathy cards, and I finally had to say, look, you know, it's symbolic. I just made up a character who actually got a Havanese dog, which I got years later, not related to that story. And it's interesting when you do write about yourself sometimes, or not yourself, people think you are writing. It was symbolic of something else. And but it's interesting. You know, I have a little disclaimer there that woman is not me technically. So that was my introduction to writing, and it's a pure coincidence really that it happened here in Amelia Island. I was still living in New Jersey.
That's a wonderful story, actually. And it is interesting that you have to kind of disassociate yourself from your characters and say, that's not me. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, everybody thinks I was a spy, but no. Bill, did you have a standout? Give us a standout experience.
Well, the only thing I can think of right now is many years ago, my wife and I belonged to a meditation group. And after a year or so of going to that group, they asked us to make a presentation about a relationship because they felt like we had a good relationship. And so we did that, and it was very well received. And that's when I got the idea to write a book about relationship. And but Barbara thought, you know, I don't want to do that at all. It's just not it would be very difficult. So it took me many years, but I finally made up my mind. And I guess 15 years later is when I finally wrote the book. And it did pretty well. And I did get an honorable mention in one of the contests that I entered. And I've gotten excellent reviews for it. So I'm very comfortable with it. That's probably the thing that I remember relates to writing.
Good, thank you very much. Esther, how about you?
Well-
I'm going to preface this with one of the things that I learned about Esther is that she has walked the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain, which is a 500-mile pilgrimage. Thank you very much. She's done that how many times? 3?
3.
Farther than I've ever walked in my life. No.
Well, you just do it one step at a time. That's what you'll learn. You know?
So what standout experience can you tell us about?
Well, you know what, that is exactly the standout experience. And I have to say that I never knew what sort of propelled me to do it. I did my first walk, my first Camino. Does everybody understand that it's an ancient pilgrimage that's been walked for over 1,000 years over and through northern Spain? It is a religious Catholic kind of pilgrimage. I'm not a Catholic. People do it for all kinds of reasons now. And I never was clear about why I was quite doing it. But it's like as people talk about, you get the call. It's like, I want to do that, you know? And so you jump into an experience like that. And for me, within a couple days of starting this walk, I said, "Ooh, I got to tell my grandchildren about this. This is like fabulous. It's hard, but it's fun," and all that. And so that was my thing that propelled me into this particular book and changed my life in other ways too. It was
Good. And
a really wonderful thing to do in early retirement.
Awesome. I think we should, and we'll delve into that a little more. Donna, standout experience that you used in your book, a book.
A book.
Any book.
Something Lisa said really resonated with me, and that is when people say, "Oh, is that true? Is that you?" And if you've read my books, there's 5 of them, and it goes from a sexual assault victim to a human trafficked victim to, and it's like, no, that's not me. But you take little parts, and I think that you take, it's like a chef making a meal, and he knows what the entree is, and you want the best ingredients. So you just pick something from this and something from that, and you add them all together. So in a way, parts of it, like Lisa also said, it's hard not to write about a personal experience, or Nancy said it earlier, about having that flow into your words, because when you experience something, you get to not only see it and hear it, but you taste it and you smell it, and your scene becomes more alive to you. So in most of my books, there's a hospital scene, and I was a critical care nurse for 22 years, so I can write a pretty good hospital scene because I have been there and done that, to the point where 2 or 3 people have come up to me and said, "I can't read your books. They're too emotional, they're too hard." But life is hard and life is emotional. And I read Willa Cather was the best example I can give of somebody who really dives into deep emotions. And when I read her books on the beach, tears just cry. I just cried tears. She is the most emotional writer. And so after I read her books, it was like I really tried to emulate that and put deep emotions in my books. So if it's not me, there's so much of me in my books. A fun thing, now that we talked about the bad thing, is I had a neighbor and he introduced me to a tequila, Costa Azul, and I brought the bottle for us. And when he first introduced this tequila to me, he says, you got to ring the bell first. So we ring the bell. And then he told this whole story about this wonderful tequila. And I love the presentation so much. So when I did the shackle and they're celebrating, I wrote the scene exactly the way my neighbor presented the tequila to me. So that it's real personal stuff, but it's all interwoven in all of them, and it's fun.
It's absolutely interwoven. It's amazing how we take our personal experiences and we just, I love the way, I love your analogy of it's like a chef, and you take a little of this and you take a little of that and a little of this, all from things that you're familiar with, or if you're not familiar with, things that you have researched. I remember that in one of my books, I needed a scene where a woman was learning how to shoot a gun. And I had actually shot a rifle when I was a kid. I had lived in in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my father was originally from southern New Mexico. And so he hunted at times. And so he would take me out and I shot the rifle, but I had never shot a handgun. So I found one of my friends who was special forces, and he took me down to the gun range and pulled out the Glock, and off I went. And it was really interesting because after I hit off about 50 rounds, all of a sudden the brass, shall we call it the brass, hit me. One hit me right under the eye protection, right here, and the other went down my shirt. And I learned that when you are firing a gun, if you fire a lot of rounds, your arm starts to tire, your grip changes, and shells, that's the word I was looking for, the shells that normally eject out to the side are going in a different direction because your hand has tilted at that point. And so I really learned the meaning of the words hot brass. Have you ever heard hot brass? It's hot. So, you take these things that you learn, in the oddest circumstances, and you just pepper your creation with them. So, moving on to, has there been any really difficult things that you have had to write about that you didn't really want to write about, but you included them anyhow? Anybody do that?
Well, when you write about, I'm sorry, when you write about dogs, there's so much going on in the dog world, and a lot of controversy you wouldn't imagine. And sometimes things happen, and I've left it out because people are very quick to blame and judge when something happens, or everybody's an expert. And I've really become aware of that. So I'm very careful when I'm writing anything, especially if it's true. Maybe leave it out if it's going to harm somebody or spark more controversy. So you have to make a little judgment there. Even on blog, social media posts, they can become very contentious. So in a daily way, you have to watch what you write.
And Bill, you wrote about relationships. Was that difficult for you? The subtitle of your book, I think, was Relationships, and it was, let me get it right, Notes on Love, Mutual Respect, Boundaries, Marriage, and Divorce. And was that a painful experience going back and relating that? And are there parts of it that you left out, that you left in, but really didn't want to? Tell me about it.
Yeah, there were quite a few painful experiences in the past that fortunately I learned from. And I really didn't leave anything out, but I also didn't put anything really unpleasant that didn't involve anyone else but me, So if I didn't want to write something that, even though I felt treated badly, I didn't want to put a lot of criticism. I just wanted to make it a helpful message that would help others by sharing what I had learned from sometimes very unpleasant experience, but often pleasant experiences too. So it was, you know, after first marriage, 17 years, and then 14 years single before getting into another marriage, you learn a lot. So I just felt like I wanted to share that. And I was very careful because I really have no credentials as far as relationship. So it was just all personal, what I felt was the best thing for me. And that was it. It wasn't anything.
Did you review it with your wife and your ex-wife before you published it?
Not my ex-wife, no.
That's great.
No, but it was, you know, it really didn't, it wasn't any kind of put down. So there was no reason for her to get into it. It was, I definitely took a lot of the blame, which I deserved. And most of the blame, actually. And then, but I did share it with my present wife. We've been together for 35 years now. So, and she's a tough editor and reviewer. So I felt really good about it after she finished. And it turned out, it's not a long book. It's just right to the point kind of thing, which is how I write. I don't usually dwell.
Perfect. Thank you. Donna, you had, you wrote a series called The Knot, basically, and that continues. You've got the King family and all of the things that happen within the King family where you're not dwelling on, but you have events that happen, everything from PTSD to addiction to what else is going on in there? Grief and rape and everything else. With all of those elements in The Knot, you also wrote a book called Discover Gold, which is kind of goes in a more positive direction than the books that you have written dealing with these other issues. Now, that's not to say that those other books don't have positive outcomes or teach people about how to deal with some of those issues. But Discover Gold kind of goes in a different direction. Can you tell us how that came about?
Sure. Fiction book is fiction, and I can usually write a fiction book in about a year. And they all do have happy outcomes, by the way, Linda. Everything starts pretty traumatic, but the characters grow and learn. And they all have positive outcomes. Discover Gold, I feel like I've been writing that book all my life. And that might be my real life's purpose. And I had no idea I was writing it. I collected quotes from philosophers, Socrates, Aristotle, to modern day philosophers for 30 years. And I had all these stories from my nursing career. But that book took me actually 5 years to write, much longer. And it's a self-help / kind of memoir. So it's a roadmap for people who are in transition, whether that be from a relationship change, like a divorce or death of a spouse, or to people who retirement, or they're just stuck. Somebody who's just stuck and wants something different. And that book, I share a lot of my life and myself in there. It's like I give the roadmap and then I say, this is how I followed the roadmap. So that took a lot more energy and thought because it is so real life. And it's like Bill, I am not an authority. What I have done is I have taken what I've learned from people who are in a position of authority, doctors, psychologists, philosophers, and combined it all together to make it easy for somebody. They don't have to read these 50 books. You know, it's like, I thought I took the best of those books and added how I used it to get through a period in my life and to reach my goal of publishing books and writing books. But that is more, it's more difficult to write a nonfiction personal book. Like when I go into the fantasy world, and that's what my fiction is, even though you draw on real life circumstances, in the end, it's fiction. Where Discover Gold, it's really my life. And that was harder to write. It took more insight. And then you think, you know, am I going to upset both my parents are deceased, so I don't think I'm going to upset them. But I do mention some family members in the book, and you wonder if it was all written positively, but they might have a different take. You like memory plays tricks on us sometimes, or we see things in the way we saw them, and it might not be in the same mindset that someone else remembers them.
When I've interviewed people for nonfiction books, they say the same thing. I interviewed an athlete who broke the color barrier in ice skating in the 1970s. And while I was talking to him, I was like, wait a minute. He kept questioning himself. He goes, I'm going to talk to my mother about that. So he said to me, don't be so hard. It was a sensitive subject. Don't be so hard on yourself when you're writing that, because everybody who tells you a story going for this nonfiction he's remembering things when he was a kid. So, you know, you try to get it right. But if those memories are imperfect anyway. And on a memoir site last night, I was looking at some people actually will change the names or a city right under a fake name, a false name, pen name, or it's very interesting when you're writing about people, you know, what to leave in and what to leave out. Legal issues. You just want to make sure.
Right, of course.
So that is very tricky. Or you can write a memoir as a novel. I don't know if anyone's done that. That's kind of a new phenomenon where, you know, you kind of fictionalize, but it's a true story. So, or tell it from a dog's point of view and nobody gets blamed.
That kind of leads me into wanting to ask Esther. So your book, which was Jamie Bacon's Secret Mission on the Camino de Santiago, I have the feeling that it's you talking through a young boy's voice. And is that true? And tell us about how you transformed into this other being.
You know, it's very interesting because I do identify with this character. And I've had people think he was real. You know, probably all of us who, well, that's sort of what you were saying, Lisa, that people think it's real, but it's fiction. I have 3 brothers. So I grew up around, to a certain extent, around boys. I was always sort of like a tomboy, also interested in sports and running and that kind of thing. And I have a grandson, and I saw him at a stage when he was a little belligerent and didn't want to do what his mother said and stuff like that. So I had some reference point, but you know, when I created certain scenes, I cried, you know, just like as if I were that little boy. And at the end, when I've proofread the book, I've gotten to the end and cried. I mean, it's a good cry. It's not a bad thing, but it's like, so what that says to me is, yes, I am in that character. And my inhibitions, my self-critique, my anger, all that comes out in a modified way through that he's not so little, well, he's a tween, he's a 11-ish, I'm not real specific about his age, but it does come out through that. And I like the character, he is me, but so is the mother, so are all the other characters. It's like, however this fiction writing happens inside our minds and our bodies, it's a phenomenal experience to create, I think, to create something totally, well, not totally, but something not our experience, but that we feel in our bodies and in our psyches. So.
And I could tell in reading some of the pages from that book, I kept thinking, is that her? Is that her?
It's the little boy in me. We're all everything, right?
Exactly. So, and Lisa, you also wrote young adult fiction, One Snowy Moon, and or Full Snow Moon, sorry. And I read part of that as well. And you have a young man in there, one who has a propensity to get into trouble, I think. And where did you find that? Did that come from within, from outside? How did you develop this character?
Long time ago, I saw a documentary on the blizzard of 1888, and then I became fascinated with that. It's an incredible story, and I just wanted to write a story with that as the backdrop. And then I discovered about the Jefferson Peace Medals that are in that book, and the Sand Hill Band of Indians in Asbury Park. They're still there. Descendants are still there, and no one had ever heard of any of this. And so I kind of I put it into a story. It was my first, I guess it's a young adult novel. A lot of adults like it. It was hard to write because we flip back to present day and 1888, and kind of comparing what it was like to be a teen then and now. So against the history of the blizzard of 1888. I think I found out later that somebody who'd gone to Yukon had written the nonfiction version of it a long time ago. So there was another tie in there, but that's how that happened. Just watching, a lot of my ideas do come from seeing a documentary or watching something on TV, a talk show. So most of my stories have come through either a computer screen or something I saw. The Around the World in 1909, that's another book I wrote. That happened because I just happened to be walking past the television when they had a picture of 4 women in a car. It happened to be Alice Hewler Ramsey, who was from Hackensack, New Jersey. I couldn't believe that. But in writing about her, I found another woman that had actually gone around the world, also from New Jersey. And that's how that book came. That's fascinating. I think I had more fun writing that book. But also, again, because of one image I saw on TV.
Yeah.
And I just write it down. You have to write it down that minute. Keep a book and you'll come back to it. It could be 5 years. It could be 10 years. You'll come back.
I had a rather similar experience when I was writing my latest book, which has a backdrop in the Yugoslav wars of 1978, or excuse me, the early 90s. And I had been to Yugoslavia. I had met a number of Yugoslavians, and then war broke out in the country. And I was following that pretty closely, and it was absolutely heartbreaking because so many people lost their lives. But I started jotting down the story. I think it might have been one of my first ones, and it ended up ultimately becoming a backdrop to this novel. So it's amazing how those events that you encounter or things that you see, hear about, affect you in some way and make their way into your writing. Donna, you have covered a lot of territory in yours, and a lot of women's issues, and you're really driven on things that are important social issues that need to be talked about and addressed. And you do that, I think, mostly through the mouthpiece of your main character is Gabriella or Gabby, right? Gabby King.
Right.
And you develop all of those things kind of, and a lot of it is seen through her eyes, and you cover women's issues pretty heavily. Is it difficult for you sometimes to talk about those issues? They're important, we know, but do you draw from other sources? Are some of them personal experiences? Tell us a little bit more.
Unlike some characters, Gabriella is everything I wasn't. she's like, oh, you know, she was wealthy. I grew up very poor. She has, I should talk about her in the present tense, shouldn't I? Because she continues in the series. She's long blonde hair. She's perfect. And so it's kind of like I want to be who I am. She's my Barbie. And then the more I wrote, I thought, gee, I'm a lot closer. There's part of us in every character that we develop. But after I thought, oh, I'm probably more like Gabriella, right? Because she's the artist and she's the tennis player. And the more I wrote the book, I thought, no, I'm more like Brett. I'm more like the male character. He's got the flaws and he has the problems. You know, I'm not her at all. I'm really him.
So, that's hilarious.
I try to, as far as everybody, when the sexual assault came out, I have been in some personal experiences that I wouldn't call them rape, but I would call them a relationship and an experience that didn't go well. And I think a lot of women have found themselves in that kind of a situation, because when I first put the book out, it's scary. Well, it's always scary, but when you attack a topic that is so controversial, before the book was even published, I had some beta readers, and one lady called me up 24 hours later. And I thought, oh no, she doesn't like this book. And I know some people don't. And she called me up, she's in her 70s, and she said to me, let me tell you what happened to me. She said, I never told anyone. My parents went to their grave. They had no idea. That's when I knew this book had a purpose. And sometimes when I sit out in front of the book loft on Center Street here, and I do my book signings, complete strangers will come up to me and they'll say, what are your books about? And I tell them, and they say, let me tell you what happened to me. And they stand there, perfect stranger. But they feel a connection because, oh yeah, I want to share my story. So if I can get women to talk about these issues, then my book had purpose and meaning for me, and that's fabulous. I mean, if I can help somebody else through sharing, that's the goal.
And you talk about how so many of your topics are hushed, and that's exactly true. They are. We tend to, particularly as women, we bury them. Some of these experiences that happen to us, and we don't like to bring them out in the open. It's going to create conflict. It's going to put us in a bad light. People are going to blame me. You know, this whole attitude toward truth is really exasperating sometimes. But and I think it's wonderful that there's an outlet where people can feel safe telling you about their experiences, because so many people never find that outlet. I'm sorry, go ahead. You started to say something.
No, I said that's correct. Really, there's so much shame. Like the human trafficking story in the shackle, I present two women. One was meant for the labor force, and I think a lot of people only associate human trafficking with the sexual end of it. And there's a huge big human employment issue.
Yes,
so I took the two friends and I put one in a cat house and I put the other one on a marijuana farm, but they still feel like, well, I must have done something. And when I wrote the scene when the detective interviews them, it's well, how were you dressed and where were you when this happened? And the woman gets really upset about it. And when she talks about it later, she says, if I were a man, those questions would not have been asked. But because I'm a woman, somehow she felt that the detectives were like, well, blaming her. Like, you wore the wrong thing. You shouldn't have been out late at night. You shouldn't have had a drink. You shouldn't have been wearing that. And so I try to bring all these issues to light in my books and give a voice to them.
I think it's important. I think it's important. And so there are 4 of us who've actually written fiction, and we talked a little bit about how much fun it is and sometimes disturbing, but we create these people, we throw all kinds of characteristics on them, and we make them into real people that we begin to identify with if we didn't already identify with them when we started. Bill, do you have any aspirations toward writing fiction? And not at all. Look at him shaking his head.
I can't even imagine that, because everything I've ever written has been from something to do with some personal experience. And that's, Barbara does the fiction. And I just publish
Maybe
her
the 2
work.
of you should collaborate.
That's a great idea.
You know, you could come up with something that would take all the knowledge that you have and her creativity. And I think that'd be kind of a fun effort. You know, think about that.
No, I really, she is a great writer. It's not, and so, and I don't see myself that way. I without the personal experiences, I don't think I'd have much to say. So.
And my husband was like that too. He was too pragmatic. I would ask him, I would say, okay, so how would you describe this? And he would go, I don't know. You know? And I would say, well, what color was the sky? He said, I never thought about that, you know. So
Yeah.
He didn't give me a lot to go on sometimes. It was hilarious.
It was, if it happens, or if I'm doing it, like I'm building something, I can explain it in total details and even add some humor in there and all that, but it all comes from something that I've done or been involved with, personal life even, but it actually took place, and that's where it comes from.
We only have a few minutes left. And I'd like to ask each of you, do you have another project forthcoming? Bill, real quick, first, do you have another project forthcoming?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you addressed it. No, actually, I've more into publishing right now, so
Okay.
it keeps me pretty busy, and I'm fine with that. If something comes up and I get an idea, I'll explore that.
You'll pursue it. Great. Esther, something coming up?
Yes, and it's going to take a lot of research before I'm ready. And it's about a 16th century great mind, Sir Francis Bacon.
And with whom you identify, with the great mind, right?
Thank you, of course. No, I'm learning from him.
And Lisa, anything coming up?
I'm currently working, I'm mid memoir. There is somebody interested. I'm trying to finish that. I'm starting a new novel memoir type based on my new pup called Fetching Quint. And my 4th contribution to a Ravel rescue anthology will come out next fall. It's about cats this time. It's a cat story. So I stretched myself.
Oh,
There is a cat writers association as well, and there's a lot of back and forth, so had to go that route.
there's a departure from your
Yes,
canine.
but it's same feeling, yes, same emotions.
And Donna.
I'm going to continue with the King family saga, book number 6, The Anchor Knot. And that's probably won't be out till the beginning of next year.
I want to thank all of you for participating today. It was really wonderful. I loved hearing your
was.
stories. So thank you so much.
Nice to meet you
Do
all.
we have
Thank
any
you.
Thank
questions
you.
from the audience? Anything you would like to ask one of these prolific authors in the time that we have remaining? Looking for questions. Somebody must have one.
If anybody has anything beyond this, they can reach out to me as far as writing proposals for nonfiction, agenting, anything.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything you'd like to add, Esther?
I just want to say how interested I am in all your books. And now that I have your names, I can go
Yes.
look
We
for
can
them. This is
follow
really
each
a very
other and help each
enjoyable
other, yes.
experience.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And Lisa, you and I have so much in common.
And you're right down the road.
I know, we
forward
need
to
to
meeting
get
you,
to know
yes.
each other.
Yes.
Yeah, you're both painters, which I found
Yes.
really interesting. And with the fiction particularly, it's interesting because I always equate it to having a blank canvas and slapping some paint on there, and building that picture, So I find it very interesting that you're both so artistic. That's great.
Last night I did an acrylic pour class where you just, I don't know if you've ever done it, but it
Mhm.
just comes out the way it wants to. So that was a good stretch.
Nice.
Well,
And
I want to
Linda, I
thank
appreciate
all of
you.
you for participating today. Linda, thank you so much for leading this wonderful group and such varied interests and directions and styles. It's just amazing. And it's so much fun to see how writing is never one thing. It's a myriad. It's just everywhere and can come from everywhere. So you have really demonstrated that thought. Yes.
Thank you all
Thank you.
for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It
Linda.
was
Thank
wonderful
Have a
meeting.
great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow.